Blake and Justin. Yep, still dragging this out. Because apparently, even after a settlement, this disaster has more hidden layers than a celebrity post-nup. So here's where we are right now. The two of them settled. The giant lawsuit got closed. Case shut, right? Nope. Because Blake's lawyers marched straight back into that courtroom, and now they're demanding legal fees, damages, and penalties from a countersuit that Justin filed against Blake. A countersuit that already got tossed. Let me repeat that. Yes, Justin's counterclaim was thrown out, and now Blake wants him to cough up for it. Honestly, bold flex. Let's rewind for anyone just joining. Here's the full messy picture. Blake accused Justin, her co-star and director on It Ends With Us, of sexual harassment and retaliation. Justin swore he did nothing. The case exploded into one of the ugliest celebrity legal brawls in years, pulling in PR agencies, leaked texts, Hollywood power games, the entire three-ring circus. Then last month, they settled. Most folks figured that was it. End of story. But Blake's legal crew had other ideas. What they're doing now is leaning on a California law called the Speak Your Truth Act. And this law is super specific. It says, if someone files a sexual harassment or abuse lawsuit, and the person they sued fires back with a defamation countersuit, and that countersuit flops, the original accuser can go back and recover their attorney's fees. Not only that, they can also get treble damages, meaning whatever financial harm they suffered gets tripled. And if the court decides the defamation suit was filed maliciously, punitive damages could be added on top. This law was built to protect survivors. The whole point, you shouldn't be bankrupted just for speaking up. Blake's argument is simple. She filed a sexual harassment lawsuit against Justin. Justin answered by filing a defamation countersuit. That countersuit got dismissed. So, under California law, she should now be paid back for everything she spent defending herself, plus extra. On paper, that sounds clean. In reality, it's turning into a spectacularly messy headache. Oh, and the judge overseeing this post-settlement hearing? Yeah, he's already dropped some public comments. And based on that first hearing, let's just say he's not exactly sold on this being a slam dunk. He's wrestling with whether Blake even qualifies to make this claim under the Speak Your Truth Act, given how weirdly this whole case played out. And honestly, once you peek at the fine print, you'll get it. Here's problem number one. Justin's defamation countersuit wasn't tossed because it had zero merit. Nope. It got dismissed on procedural grounds. There's a huge difference between a judge saying this claim is garbage and a judge saying, you filed this wrong. The law Blake is leaning on was built for situations where a defamation countersuit was improper and failed. But if it failed for paperwork reasons, not because the actual argument was nonsense, does that even fit the law's requirements? That's what the judge is trying to untangle. Then comes issue 2, which is just as messy. Blake's own sexual harassment claim, the original lawsuit at the heart of everything, was also dismissed procedurally. It never saw a trial. Blake never stood in front of a jury and proved she was harassed. That's not me saying it didn't happen. That's just the cold legal reality. So now the judge has to somehow decide whether Justin filed that defamation countersuit with malicious intent. But there's almost no evidence in the court record to help him make that call, because the case settled before anyone could present anything real. What Blake's team is basically asking for is a whole new mini-trial after the case has already settled, just to fight over fees and damages. And you can see why a judge might raise an eyebrow at that. But here's the part that really got me. Victoria Burke. She's a law professor and literally the person who helped draft the Speak Your Truth Act. She came out publicly and said she believes Blake's legal team is weaponizing this law. Not using it, weaponizing it. Her exact words? It was being used as a PR redemption tool. And honestly, that hits different when it's coming from the woman who wrote the damn legislation. She didn't cook up this law so some rich A-list celebrity could scrub her reputation after a nasty Hollywood legal circus. She made it to protect regular people. You know, actual humans, who come forward about sexual abuse and then get crushed by expensive countersuits designed to shut them up. Now, look, I'm not saying Blake's lawyers are wrong for trying. That's literally their job. Push every legal lever until it breaks. But when the actual architect of the law you're waving around says it's being misused, that's a problem. That's the kind of detail a judge notices. That's the kind of thing that haunts a case. So here we are. A settlement that was supposed to close the book on one of the most talked about celebrity legal brawls in years. And yet somehow, there's still a hearing to get through. Still a judge deciding whether Blake walks away with even more cash, or whether this law simply doesn't work the way her team imagines. Justin's side, for their part, has pushed back hard. They're arguing the Speak Your Truth Act doesn't fit this mess. And given what the judge already signaled in that early hearing, they might not be totally wrong. The whole thing is genuinely fascinating from a legal angle because this isn't just about Blake and Justin anymore. Whatever this judge decides will set a precedent for how the Speak Your Truth Act gets applied going forward. California courts don't have much case history to work with here. This law is relatively new and there haven't been many high-profile tests like this. So the ruling, whatever it ends up being, is going to matter way beyond this one case. Other attorneys will watch, other survivors will be affected. And that's genuinely huge to wrap your head around because think about what's at stake on both sides. If the judge rules for Blake and says yes, the Speak Your Truth Act applies here. Yes, she gets attorney's fees and treble damages. That's a massive win for her team. It sends a message that even procedurally dismissed countersuits can trigger this compensation, which could actually help future survivors who get hit with retaliatory defamation claims. It would make defendants think twice before reflexively filing countersuits as a pressure tactic. But flip the coin. If the ruling goes Justin's way, or if the judge decides the law simply doesn't fit this situation, it raises uncomfortable questions about how Blake's team chose to play this. Because remember, Victoria Burke already said publicly this feels like a misuse of the legislation. If a judge agrees with that read, even quietly, that's not exactly a glow-up for Blake's public image. And at this point in the story, public image? Yeah, neither side can afford to mess that up. Let's talk PR for a sec, because this legal saga's media war has been just as insane as the courtroom drama. From day one, this case wasn't just fought before a judge. It was fought in the press, on social media, in interviews, in perfectly timed statement drops. Both sides knew exactly what they were doing with their public narratives. Blake's initial filing was packed with details, specific allegations, named names, dates, text messages. It read less like a legal document and more like something designed to go viral. Justin's team fired back the same way with their own carefully crafted statements and a countersuit that, whether it had legal legs or not, absolutely generated headlines. And now here's Blake, post-settlement, still in court, still swinging. Her side's framing, all about justice and accountability, making sure Justin pays not just for what he allegedly did, but for the legal retaliation she claims she faced. The Speak Your Truth Act is a sympathetic hook. It's built to protect victims. Using it puts Blake in the role of the person still fighting for herself even after the deal is done. That's a compelling story. Whether it's the correct legal application of the statute? Totally different question. Justin, meanwhile, has mostly stayed quiet publicly since the settlement. His legal team is doing all the talking in court, and their argument? Focused and technical. This law doesn't apply. The circumstances don't fit. The case is over. There's strategic logic there too. The less Justin says, the less footage exists, the less the news cycle has to chew on. Let the lawyers argue and hope the judge sees it their way. But here's what I keep circling back to. Something Rachel Bennett pointed out about the evidentiary problem. The judge would have to find that Justin filed that defamation suit with malice. Malice, in legal speak, means he either knew the claims were false or acted with reckless disregard for whether they were true or not. That's a specific high bar, and because the main case settled before trial, with zero evidence formally presented or tested in front of a jury, there's honestly almost nothing in the court record for a judge to point at and say, right here, this proves malicious intent. Blake's lawyers would have to convince the judge to make that finding from scratch, without the evidentiary foundation a full trial would have built. And that's where this ask starts feeling like a major stretch. Even if you sympathize with Blake's overall position, you're asking a judge to dig through a settled case, reconstruct someone's intent, apply a barely tested law, and do it all in a post-settlement proceeding that was never designed for any of this. tall order, and judges usually hate being asked to do things that don't fit neatly into their procedural box. Now, none of this means Blake will lose. Courts can surprise you, and her legal team isn't clueless. They clearly think there's an argument worth making. Otherwise, why bother? But the path to victory is genuinely narrow, and the obstacles are real, not just technicalities you can brush off. What this whole mess really shows is how unsatisfying legal settlements can be. We see settlement and think resolution. Fighting over money changed hands. Everyone moved on. But that's not always reality. Settlements leave doors open all the time, on purpose or not. In this case, both sides agreed to settle the main claims, but left the fee and damages question from that dismissed countersuit unresolved. Maybe that was deliberate. Maybe Blake's team always planned to come back for this. Maybe it was just a drafting slip. Either way, here we are months later, still in a courtroom, still arguing about a case that was supposed to be closed. And honestly, that's kind of the Blake Lively story through this whole thing, isn't it? Nothing clean, nothing wrapped up the way you'd expect. Every time it looked resolved, something else surfaced. Another filing, another hearing, another statement, another layer. And whether you think Blake has been entirely in the right, or you think her team has been playing PR chess, probably both things can be true at once. You have to admit she's been relentless. Her legal team hasn't left a single avenue unexplored. Justin, on the other hand, started this whole saga as the filmmaker behind a movie that was genuinely well received. It ends with us crushed at the box office. People went and saw it. Then the promo rollout turned into a dumpster fire. The behind-the-scenes tension went public super fast, and suddenly the film itself became almost secondary to everything swirling around it. His reputation took a serious hit. The PR firm allegations alone, the claims about a coordinated smear campaign to trash Blake's reputation, that stuff cut deep in a way courtroom battles can't fully capture. Because that war plays out in public perception, not in front of a robed judge. So, even if Justin's legal team successfully argues the Speak Your Truth Act doesn't apply here, and Blake walks away without those extra fees and damages she's begging for, Justin doesn't exactly emerge squeaky clean either. The settlement happened. That means something. Settlements aren't technically admissions of guilt, but in the court of public opinion, people draw their own conclusions. And the narrative around Justin Baldoni has been carved pretty deep over the past year. A favorable court ruling can't just erase that. That's the thing about celebrity legal cases that makes them so different from regular lawsuits. The legal outcome and the reputational outcome are two completely separate beasts, and they don't always run in the same direction. Someone can win in court and still lose in the headlines. Someone can settle without admitting anything and still get defined by the allegations. The judge's actual ruling at the end of this post-settlement hearing will matter legally and maybe financially, but it probably won't be the final word on how Blake or Justin gets remembered in this story. What'll be interesting to watch, and this is genuinely worth paying attention to, is how the Speak Your Truth Act gets talked about after this case closes. Victoria Burke stepping up to say publicly that she felt the law was being misused? That was a huge moment. Law professors who draft legislation don't just insert themselves into active cases. The fact she felt strongly enough to comment says a lot. And if this case ends up as a cautionary tale in legal circles, a well-intended protection statute getting dragged into a high-profile celebrity feud, muddying its original purpose, that's going to shape how lawmakers and advocates think about similar laws going forward. Because the Speak Your Truth Act was created in a specific context to solve a very real problem. Survivors of sexual harassment and abuse were getting buried under expensive defamation countersuits filed by the very people they accused. That power imbalance is real. Most survivors don't have the resources to fight a defamation countersuit while also pursuing their original harassment claim. The law was meant to level the playing field, and that mission matters. But when the person invoking it is one of the most recognizable actresses in Hollywood, with a legal team that's clearly been operating at an elite level throughout this entire fight, the optics shift. Blake Lively is not a person without resources. She is not a person without a platform. She's had access to some of the best legal representation money can buy through this whole fight. Using a survivor protection statute in that context, and doing it in a way that the law's own author finds troubling, raises legitimate questions about whether this law is even working as intended. None of that means Blake fabricated her original claims. None of it means Justin is innocent of everything he was accused of. Those questions are separate, and the settlement doesn't answer them either way. What it does mean is that the legal strategy being deployed right now in this specific post-settlement fight is messy, and the judge clearly sees that based on what he's already said. So where does this land? The hearing still has to play out. The judge has to decide whether Blake even qualifies to bring this claim under the Speak Your Truth Act. And if he decides she does, then he has to figure out how to make the necessary legal findings without the evidentiary record a full trial would have created. That's genuinely difficult legal territory, and there's zero guarantee it goes Blake's way just because her lawyers decided to chase it. My honest read? The judge is going to have a hard time ruling fully in Blake's favor, given everything we know. The procedural dismissals on both sides, the settlement before trial, the evidentiary black holes, the law's own architect publicly questioning its application here. That's a ton of headwind for Blake's legal team to push through. But hey, I've been surprised by court outcomes before. And so has anyone who follows these cases closely. What I do know, this story isn't over. Not legally, not publicly, and honestly, not culturally. Because the conversation this case sparked about power dynamics on film sets, how studios and PR firms operate, what retaliation looks like in Hollywood, that conversation didn't die with the settlement. It's still buzzing. And whatever this judge decides in the coming weeks is going to add another wild chapter. We'll be watching. Wild chapter. We'll be watching.